Burlesque by Kamari333. Chapter 21. Realizations. Lust got to work making a little room here and there in his little apartment for Red. It was a one-bedroom apartment, so there wasn't much he could do about extra space, but stuffing some of the things he didn't use into dimension boxes certainly helped with the clutter. They would have to go house hunting for a bigger apartment to make this feasible long-term. Lust felt his face warm and his magic prickle pleasantly in his soul at the thought. He was going to live together with Red. They were going to be roommates. Oh my god, they were roommates! Lust was glad for the few moments he had to himself, because he couldn't help doing an embarrassing little dance that needed a moment to scream wordlessly into a pillow. He knew it wasn't coming about under the most ideal circumstances, but living with his date mate was like a dream come true on top of all these other wonderful dreams come true. Lust had managed to clean out half his closet by the time he heard Dance laughing in his living room. Springing to his feet, Lust practically skipped out of the bedroom to greet his date mate. Dance sat on the couch, a large dimension box sitting in front of him on the coffee table. He was drowning in a familiar large leather coat, the sight sending a heated spark of something good up and down Lust's spine. He purred, slinking over to snuggle into Dance's side. "So, looks like things went well," he hummed, arms snaking around Dance and pulling him closer, sighing happily. Dance laughed dryly. "Hardly. Shit." He reached up, wiping at his sockets with the back of the coat sleeve. "It isn't gonna work. We can't even have a decent conversation. We have nothing in common, and he..." Dance stopped, rubbing his face again, letting out a breath he had been holding. Lust swallowed down his own frustration. He could see there was a serious communication issue between them. What? He thinks I hate him?" Dance finally admitted, sounding more like a question with the ending inflection. "I mean, he's not wrong. I do hate him. He's a violent bonehead." Lust wanted to scream. Instead, he gripped Dance's hands in his and squeezed. "Did you tell him how you feel?" "Yes," Dance answered immediately. Well, not in so many words." He looked like he wanted to try and pantomime his way out. "Guess I might have badgered him a little." Lust quirked a brow, feeling like he was missing some important context. "So, why are you wearing his coat then?" "I don't know. I was having a bit of a rant about how awful his apartment is, and he just..." Dance pulled one hand away, waving it toward the coat. "It was on me, and it..." Lust sighed. A flustered Dance wasn't a particularly eloquent Dance. It was adorable how difficult it was for him to find words for genuine feelings, but made figuring out where everything went wrong that much harder. "Okay, and what about your talk? What did he say, exactly?" Dance clutched at his pant leg with his free hand, his grip on Lust tightening. "Kept telling me to leave. Admitted he'd been avoiding me, asshole." "Did he say why?" Lust asked. Dance paused. "Because he, Realization dawned on him, gradating his confused expression into that of shock. "Because he was worried about me having a panic attack?" Lust brought his boyfriend's hand up to his face, nuzzling into Dance's palm. This wasn't just a matter of miscommunication. This was a matter of Dance being vulnerable to influence. Lust had been trying to figure out for a while now why it was Dance acted so different around Red than he did around Lust. Why he acted different in public than he did when they were alone. The way Dance was slowly able to calm down and rationalize with only minimal prompting made Lust wonder if perhaps there was a pattern. He couldn't help recalling that both times Dance had panicked around Red before, Red had also panicked first. Dance leaned his head onto Lust's shoulder, letting the tension bleed out from him. His sockets drifted shut, and Lust could see the same look of regret and confusion on his face that he had seen before, after other moments of heated words or impulsive actions. Lust kneaded at Dance's shoulder, working away the last bit of tension from his graceful form. "This isn't gonna work," Dance finally muttered. He's an asshole. It isn't gonna work. Lust was starting to think that that phrase meant something different, or perhaps more, than even Dance knew or intended. Sweetie, maybe you could try expressing your feelings another way? Like how? Dance asked, not looking up, clearly trying to stay as calm and collected as possible, something Lust was immensely grateful for. Lust thought for a moment. Well, what you want is to date him too, right? No! Dance's sockets shot open as he denied reflexively, his face again turning that lovely shade of azure. Lust leveled him with an expression he hoped came off as both unimpressed but also encouraging. Dance groaned softly, nodding as he averted his gaze, looking ashamed and bitter. Lust pressed a soft kiss to Dance's teeth. Sweetie, it's okay. It's more than okay, actually. It's wonderful. All we have to do now is find a way Red will understand. Preferably one where there isn't a lot of talking involved while we're at it. Dance deadpanned. I think I've run my mouth enough, thanks. Lust chuckled, kissing Dance again, his soul aching for him, wanting to chase away his pain just as Dance had chased away his. Would it be easier if I was there with you? Dance shrugged in response, leaning back into Lust with a tired sigh. Lust brought his hand from Dance's shoulder to run along his skull. Guess they would try again after Red had moved in. Red spent maybe an hour cleaning up as much of the mess as he could, ignoring his unwanted house guest. When he was done there, he lifted the badger into the air with blue magic and marched it out of his apartment, down the hall, and into the basement where he knew the nest was. It wasn't the first time he had to manually extract one of the little vermin out of the apartment, so he knew exactly where to dump the thing so it scurried off in the right enough direction without getting too close. Then Red went back to his room to look for something to pawn off. The fridge would get him a few G, and he might be able to get something for the TV, but not much. Itemizing all the things he could logistically survive parting with, whether he wanted to or not, his best bet to raise the money he needed was to sell some of his books. Red knelt down and opened one of the remaining dimension boxes. The first one he opened had his clothes in it, so he closed that and moved it aside, grabbing for the second one. The next box had books in it, but those were his textbooks he used for work, as well as his grill, which he also used for work sometimes, when he could charm a permit out of the locals, or when he was strong-armed into babysitting the high school marching band. A few worthless knickknacks with sentimental value, and his doctorates. None of which he could sell. Well, he could, but he'd be an idiot to do so. Red closed the box and went to open the third, which had to be his library box, only to realize it wasn't there. Shit. Dance swiped it. Red picked up the other two boxes, shortcutting into the living room of Lust's apartment. He immediately set the boxes to the side, relief easing his nerves upon seeing the third box on the coffee table. Welcome home, sweetie. Lust purred from the couch, where he and Dance were cuddling together, laying long ways with Lust on top, half burrowed in Red's coat which Dance was still wearing. All done? Just gotta pay the month's rent, then yeah. Red mumbled, flipping his box open and checking the contents. Some of the books weren't in the best condition, scavenged from the dump or bargain bins or yard sales. Even Red's attempt at refurbishing and restoration could only do so much. But he had a few first editions, rare gems found in the back of old bookstores or gifts from his brother, that he could easily get a few hundred for, even taking into account how the shops would lowball him. Oh, I'm sorry, sweetie, I completely forgot to give you. Lust started, sitting up and pulling away from Dance. Red held up his hand to stop Lust where he was. No, I ain't taking your money. You're doing too much as it is. How much do you owe for this month? Lust asked, stubbornly, standing up and stretching. None of your business. Red replied evenly, reaching into the box to swipe through the inventory, doing the math in his head for how many he'd need to make up the difference. So I should just give you a blank check, then? Was Lust's cheeky response. No! Red whined, trying to keep his voice down, his tone calm. So you have the money for it? Dance asked. Well, no. Then shut up, stop messing with your inventory and tell us what you need. Dance hissed. Not gonna happen. Red retorted, closing the box and picking it up. I'll figure something out. Sweetheart. Lust simpered, slinking over to him and snuggling into his side, arms around his middle. We have a solution, and that's for you to stop being stubborn and let us help. He purred, one of his hands settling on Red's ilia and squeezing gently, pressing into one of Red's deeper scratches. The warmth radiating off of Lust's every surface seemed to drip from him and seep into Red's bones, demanding he relax, give in, comply. An intoxicating combination of sensations that had Red's willpower crumbling faster than he could rebuild it. But Red tried, only to be cut off when Lust slipped under his arm, getting between Red and his dimension box. Put the box down, sweetheart. Lust half-ordered, half-pleaded, looking up at him through hooded sockets, his magic shimmering with unconditional trust and sincerity. Red wanted to fight it, to shout that he was supposed to be the one taking care of him. However, he also felt that pulse in his crusty black soul, the last few shreds of his love, hope, and compassion that riled against him, demanding he give his sweetheart anything and everything he wanted, even if that something was the last remains of his pride. Red put the box down, using his blue magic to let it float gently back to the table without having to bend down. Lust smiled up at him, bringing his arms up to wrap around Red's neck and pull him into a grateful, appreciative kiss, purring against him like it was Red who had done him a favor. Red instinctively curled his own arms around Lust, supporting him and holding him closer. All the fight left Red, drained away through every point of contact, purged from him by Lust's genuine affection. Red just couldn't say no, could he? Damn it. Lust pulled away, licking his teeth, a salacious smile on his face. Now, how much is this month's rent? Red ground his teeth, muttering the number under his breath, averting his gaze. I didn't quite catch that, sweetie. Lust pressed, ever gentle, yet firm. 996G, Red said a little louder. What? Dance's voice came from the couch, cold and horrified. Red didn't flinch, but it was a near thing. I told you it's too much to ask, Red grumbled defensively. It's not worth half that much. Dance's outraged snarl continued. What do you mean? Lust asked, shifting in Red's hold, presumably so he could face Dance without pulling away. The place is a one-room, not a one-bedroom, but a one-room apartment with a dinky bathroom to the side. Dance ranted. It's got no insulation to speak of, no air conditioning or heating, no hot water, the electricity was cut off, and it's infested with badgers. Well, when you put it like that, Red grumbled, his face undoubtedly heating up and glowing from the shame of it all, that he couldn't even afford a place like that. Red? Lust's voice was quiet, the quiet of an approaching storm. Red stiffened, bracing himself. Sweetheart, is this true? Red felt his perpetual sweating intensify. The tone of Lust's voice was too quiet, too sweet, like he was trying to overcompensate to cover up something decidedly unpalatable. Saccharin and cyanide. It was hot, yes, but also worrisome. For Red had no idea what it meant, what pattern of behavior it heralded. He was once again thrown into uncharted territory, and he was certain he could not afford to misstep. Maybe? Red answered eloquently, realizing too late that he had once again given the wrong answer, TM. Lust went silent again, tightening his hold. Red, sweetie, why don't we go back and talk to your landlord together? He asked, the tone and denotation perfectly reasonable. It was the connotation that made Red uncertain. Nah. Red tried to brush it off, forcing some humor into his voice. He ain't one for conversation. How's about I just go back and deal with Dance, sweetie? Since Red is going to be unreasonable, would you give me a ride, please? Lust asked, pulling away from Red. I don't know if that's a good idea. Dance started, clearly as put off by the idea of Lust being in that slum as Red. Well, that's okay. We can find out by going, Lust reasoned, smiling sweetly. Besides, that way I can pay the nice man in person. Red and Dance must have had the exact same thought at the exact same time, as when Red looked over to Dance, he was looking back with the same unease Red was feeling. His shoulders slumped in the same resignation. Lust was going to get his way, one way or another. A line had been crossed, and there was no going back. They both held their hands out to Lust at the same time. Lust happily took hold of both, his left eyelid shimmering in a lovely, if unnerving, shade of purple. Red dragged them through to his soon-to-be former bedroom, praying he hadn't just failed his sweetheart, his pet, a second time. Lust had always considered himself a patient monster. He knew how to wait his turn, how to tell himself no, how to resist every earthly temptation imaginable. Despite it not actually being his primary alignment, Lust was rather proud of his patience. Upon seeing firsthand the conditions of Red's apartment, Lust felt nearly all of that patience run out. Taking a deep, grounding breath, Lust headed for the door, unlocking it delicately and stepping out into the hallway. The wood creaked beneath his feet, and he heard a noise like the shriek of a banshee come from somewhere below. He could only assume someone was watching a horror movie. Lust ignored the noise and the cold, marching confidently through the unfamiliar hall, unsure where he was going, but knowing if he stopped now he would lose the tenuous hold on his composure that he still had. Red followed behind him, hands in the pockets of his shorts and shoulders up to make himself look as intimidating as possible without his coat to add bulk. Dance came up the rear, clutching Red's coat tighter around him and staying close, clearly rattled by the environment. Lust made a mental note to pay Dance a little extra affection when they got home, turning a corner and finding a rusty metal staircase which didn't look all that sturdy. He took off down them, heading for the ground floor, since according to the sign, they were on the second floor at the moment. "Lust, slow down, where are you even going?" Red asked, his voice coming out tense. "I'm looking for the landlord. They usually have a ground floor room, right?" Lust answered without turning around. "Well, yeah, he's got room 1A, but..." Red confirmed, which only made Lust widen his stride to take the steps 2 at a time, covering more ground without actually quickening his pace. Lazy and elegance perfectly melded into efficiency. Lust made his way down and scanned the hallway for the room labeled 1A before stepping before it and knocking twice. Red came up behind Lust, bristling and sweating nervously. Dance wasn't far behind, in much the same state. Both of them looked like they wanted to grab Lust and run, although he couldn't for the life of him figure out why. After all, he was only here to have a nice, pleasant little chat. Because Lust was a pacifist at heart. And wasn't this sleazy, selfish, manipulative, abusive son of a bitch so motherfucking lucky that Lust was too lazy and polite to rip his fucking spine out from his mouth and demonstrate a few advanced yoga poses involving him being face down in the musty carpet? The door cracked open, the sound of metal straining against itself telling Lust the mistrustful man peeking through the crack in the door hadn't bothered to unlatch the chain bolt. His wide, almost bulging eyes sat far too wide on his chubby, greasy face, which had too much forehead thanks to his receding hairline. Lust couldn't see all of his face, but something about it looked exceedingly familiar.
Well, 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 what do we have here?
The slovenly man's voice said.
Looking for lodging, pretty thing? My apartments are full, but I think I can spare my...
He stopped, seemingly just now noticing that Lust wasn't alone.
Red, you're late with your rent. Again. Do you have it yet?
Actually, Lust purred, smiling up at the human who was setting off all of his warnings. That's why I'm here. See, I have a bit of a complaint to make. Do you take constructive criticism?
No.
The human answered, going to close the door. Lust caught it with his hand, not letting it close another millimeter. He locked eyes with the landlord. First time for everything. To begin, you charge far too much for the quality of your establishment. This month, Red is going to pay you no more than 400 G, and that's us being generous. Red gripped onto Lust's shoulder. Lust, stop. This ain't up for negotiation. Sweetheart, Lust tried to answer him patiently. I value your opinion, but now is not the time. Red tried to pull Lust back. Instead, Lust took a step forward, opening the door as much as the chain bolt would allow. The human, who had been trying to push the door closed, was shoved back a bit, and the alarm on his face was almost funny. But nothing was funny about this. There was no humor in his boyfriend being subjected to such poor conditions and charged ridiculously inflated prices for shoddy housing. Lust was always up for a good joke, but there was nothing humorous about this, except that this fucking pig thought he could get away with it without consequences.
Red, get this slut away from me, or...
The human started. Excuse me. Lust cut the human off, pushing a little harder on the door, making the chain strain and the wood of both door and frame whine in protest. But I would appreciate if you would pay attention to me during this very important conversation. The human snapped his attention to where Lust's hand was on his door. Lust paid more attention to his face, where there was a healthy flicker of fear. No remorse quite yet. Ah, well, can't win them all. Now that I have your attention, Lust purred. Recall, we were bargaining over Red Sweetie's rent this month. I think it is more than reasonable to go as low as 400G, don't you agree? Considering the lack of hot water and heating, which you know is illegal and the Monster Embassy would probably find rather interesting. The human went pale, his eyes shining with alarm.
Yes, 400 is perfect. I was just about to fix that typo. Thank you so much for letting me know.
Lust smiled, releasing the door and reaching into his pocket. Wonderful. See? But now that you're aware, I think you'll note in your record books that poor Red has been dutifully paying the misprinted sum for a while now, hasn't he?
The
human gulped.
Perhaps? I would have to look.
I'm certain you'll find he's likely been paying the wrong sum for a very long time. Lust continued, pleasant as ever. And since I'm sure neither one of us really wants to bother with a courtroom, I think we can easily settle this between ourselves, right? The human nodded eagerly. Lust felt Red's hand fall away from his shoulder, and he suppressed a chuckle. So, Lust continued, I think, given how tedious actually going through all of your properly documented records, which I'm certain you've been keeping loving track of, how about we do you a favor and call it even, if you waive this month's rent and present us with, say, 300G of back pay? Sweetheart, that ain't... Red started, only to stop when Lust looked back at him. Oh, I know, it's not nearly as much as he actually owes you. But let's show the poor fellow a little mercy, Lust cooed, reaching back to take one of Red's claws in his hand, nuzzling it. After all, this is a nice friendly chat, and making concessions helps to keep it friendly, don't you think? When Lust turned back to the slumlord's door, he found the man holding out a wad of cash.
This is all I have on hand right now.
Lust took it delicately, counting it out. 245? Well, given that we sprung this on you so suddenly, I suppose this will do. He folded it enough to fit in his vest pocket, sliding it in there with an amiable grin on his face. Thank you so much for your time, sweetie. Lust purred at the human. Such a shame we won't be meeting again, since Red is now moving out.
Not a problem,
The human said immediately.
Have a nice day.
He slammed his door shut, and Lust smiled wider as he heard a deadbolt slammed into place. Lust purred, pleased that their talk had gone so well. Now that that's over, he turned and pulled Red and Dance into a group hug, nuzzling them both. Why don't we grab dinner and go home, And the three of us can have a talk. Dance and Red both stiffened in his hold. Lust understood. Neither one of them apparently did well when it came to talking. But that was why Lust was there. He would do all the talking if he had to, for them. It was the least he could do when they had changed his world so much, made it so much better. They were too important not to care about. Dance had tried to pay attention to Red while he interacted with Lust. Dance just didn't know how Lust did it. He wormed his way right up to Red, fearlessly, twinkled his eyelights at him, and suddenly Red was a blushing mess, eager to please, and devoid of any real argument or resistance. Lust had him so tightly wrapped around his little finger, Dance doubted there was anything Red would deny him, for long. Perhaps that was simply a thing Lust could do, though. After all, there wasn't much Dance wouldn't do for Lust either. Lust was the one to pull them all through a shortcut to one of the Grilby restaurants, the Dance Club one, which Dance's old friend owned and ran. Lust kissed both of them before pulling away, asking them to wait outside while he ran in to grab them all lunch. This, of course, left Dance and Red alone, together, in the neighboring alleyway. Dance looked up at Red to find that the other monster was sporting his namesake all over his maxilla and nasal ridge, his single crimson eyelight constricted and quivering. He almost looked, no, he did look embarrassed. He was embarrassed. It was cute. Red wasn't looking at him, looking almost delicate without the bulk of his coat, his thin, ratty wife-beater hanging off of him loosely around the sides, showing a bit of his rib cage through the armholes. Dance could see a particularly deep scratch on one of them. If he just took one step closer, he would be able to touch it. If he just said the fucking words, he'd be able to do a lot of things. Instead, he shrugged off Red's coat, reluctantly, oh so reluctantly, and held it out to him. "Thanks," he mumbled, looking away, already feeling bereft without the extra pressure on his shoulders or the miasma of watermelon and smoke. Dance felt the weight of the garment lifted and let go. "Forget about it," Red grumbled back as he presumably shrugged the coat back on. The ever-present chill in the air from Red's LV seemed to be fidgeting, agitated, but lacking in aggression. Dance let his hood fall back down, rolling his neck and shoulders as he found he himself couldn't stand still. When he looked back at Red, he had pulled out a cigarette from his coat pocket. Lighting it up and taking a long drag, Red exhaled a shapeless cloud of smoke through his nasal aperture, some of his restlessness receding along with it. Red flicked his gaze back to Dance, eyelight scanning up and down him in a quick, practice motion. His eyelight hazed over, the color muddying again, and Dance could have sworn he again saw the sparkle of another color, another light. Once more, however, there was an interruption, and Red's gaze was pulled away by the sound of a passing group of rowdy humans. His stance widened, going lax and loose as his expression hardened, like a guard dog on alert. Dance wondered how he had missed so many of these little things before. The way Red tilted his head to one side, how the hand holding the cigarette made sure to never cover his false tooth, how his posture changed so drastically based on his mood. Stuffing his own hands firmly in his hoodie pockets, Dance tore his eyelights away from the other monster, kicking himself inwardly. He had no place asking Red to just set aside all the negative feelings they had towering between them. Not for a passing fling, for a stupid fucking crush that would likely only end badly. Not when Dance had only ever made an ass of himself despite everything. There was no possible way this was ever going to work. Hey everyone, thank you so much for listening. If you liked it, hit the like button to let me know and subscribe to see what I make next. Links in the description lead to the original fic posted on AO3, as well as my Patreon and Ko-fi. If you like my stuff, please consider supporting me. Every little bit helps. Lastly, if you have a request for a recording, whether a one-shot or a series, let me know in the comments. I also do commissions, details of which are on my Patreon. So keep in touch. Bye!